Hello, welcome to the first video on my YouTube channel. I'm still working on most of the details, like the final touches on the character model and the voice changer settings. I'm using a voice changer because it would be very bad if people in my real life figured out who I am. So I'm just trying to make my voice sound different enough that it's not recognizable. I'm sure you can understand. So I'm still tweaking all the settings. Obviously this is probably the first video I've seriously tried to edit and stuff, so don't be surprised if this is too terrible. And also, I am going to try to do this video in one take, because I've spent the last few months writing and rewriting scripts and re-recording and recording, and I need to stop being perfectionist. Get something out. It'll be bad, but that's the point, because it can only get good if it's been bad for a while. There needs, I can't just out of the gates become perfect. So this is just a video to start with. So I was trying to think of a good video to be my first video, and I think I'm going to completely give up trying to make it anything special. This is just some random thing that I was thinking about, and it's going to be the first video. There's nothing going to be special about it, the first one. It's just happens to be numerically first. That's it. I had an idea a while ago, actually, but I've been thinking about it more recently, to do something like the Scholar's Story from the novel Hyperion, but for my own life. For background, in the novel Hyperion by Dan Simmons, it's divided into distinct stories with sort of like the Canterbury Tales with different protagonists, and they're all on a pilgrimage together. And the Scholar's Story essentially involves this girl who's a researcher getting an illness that makes her age backwards. So every time she goes to sleep, the next morning she wakes up a day younger. But she has not only forgotten everything that she learned after that day originally, but everything that happened the previous day. So every day she's waking up as if she was that age, just waking up. So she's completely oblivious to the fact that it might be 20 years later. Initially, when she's still relatively adulty, she makes a video of herself, but directed to herself, that says hey, you're aging backwards, you've forgotten everything, this guy's your boyfriend, these events happened, and stuff like that. Just reminding her of her life that she forgot. So I think this could be a sort of useful thing in one's own life too. For me in particular, I think I also have really, really bad memory. I'm not sure why it is. I have ideas, but just I can't remember things very well. And also, I think there's a lot that my subconscious is purposefully trying to hide from me, because it's not fun to think about. And it's easier to just avoid problems and stuff, but then nothing changes and life just stays the way it is, which is not necessarily the way I want it to stay. So for me in particular, it could be a great way to remember certain very important things that somehow I managed to forget, and while also to make sure that my subconscious isn't allowed to avoid certain things. They're definitely very, very bad to think about, but if I don't think about them, then it'll only get worse. Essentially the idea is to record a video of myself talking to myself, essentially just with important information, but also intermixed could be other videos or audio clips could be cut in if I think they're very important, and I'll talk a bit about that later. Some things that one might want to include in this video to oneself is you could do a video every year or every month or every quarter or every week. That might be a bit excessive, but the point is, and then you have your goals for that time period. Actually something you could do is you could have a monthly video mainly, but then every week you record an extra 5-minute segment, just about what you're doing that week in particular. Things you could include could also be just things you want to remember in general, not necessarily things about your life or situation, just things about the world. You could include habits that you're trying to build or kick, and especially, this is very important, why you wanted to do that. That's the main thing that I forget a lot, is I'll write in a note that oh, I need to kick this habit, but I forget the reason that I need to do that. So then I think, oh, this isn't that important, and then the fact that I have the bad habit comes back, and I'm oh, this is why it was causing me so much problems. So that could be a great way to make sure that you can't forget those kinds of things, especially if they're very important. Like an example could be, oh, since we're trying to lucid dream, make sure you do reality checks very frequently during the day, and make sure to do one when you first wake up, and journal your dreams when you first wake up. You could include profound things that you think, that you find or think of, because you always read these profound statements that you feel like change your worldview, but they don't actually, because your brain just wants to go back to that normal rut. So this could be a way to force your brain to consider those new innovative ideas, and then it's much harder to avoid them, and then hopefully you can actually make use of the important things that you've learned. You could include self-affirmations, like you're going to be the best, you're going to do it, stuff like that. I've heard people say that works really well. So that would be something that I'll be trying at least. Something to include also could be reminders of times your brain has tricked you. You could be thinking oh, I did this thing and I thought my friends were so mad at me and I was ready to cry and everything was terrible and I felt at the bottom of the world. And then I'd ask them about it and they didn't even remember it happened. The world is very different from my perspective, and it would be useful to make sure that I remember that there are a lot of things that my brain thinks is a big deal, but nobody else thinks that's true. And when you step back and evaluate it logically, it isn't a big deal. And that could be a very useful thing to remind yourself of. If you're not living a particularly nice life, you could list the things that you're living for to make sure that you start every day off anticipating fun, happy things. Even if there's not many of them, even something to think about, that's better than the normal mundane horror, is a lot better than just not thinking about it at all. It could probably be counterproductive if your list is too short, so maybe keep that in mind also. But it should be easy to add perfunctory things to the list, oh, I'm living for good food or something silly like that, just to pad it out a bit, to make it not seem depressingly short. You could remind yourself what the true worst case scenario is. For me, I always get in spiraling loops, oh, life is gonna end, this is terrible, my life is over, this is the worst thing that's ever happened, etc. But for a lot of things, the worst case scenario isn't actually that bad. For example, if me, you're in college, you might commonly have thoughts oh, if I keep doing this bad on homework, I'm going to fail the class and life is going to be over. But then when you think about it, it isn't really. Maybe you'll be a little bit behind and maybe your parents will be rather mad at you, but most things will probably be fine. And especially if you have that list of things you're living for, you might find that those aren't affected by most of your worst case scenarios, which can be a very, very good thought, I think. So I'm definitely going to do that. You could list conditionals that you're reminding yourself of. For example, it could be, if I get a car, make sure to do this. Or if I can find a hard drive for under a certain price, buy it. Just things that you might forget that, but that you want to know if it you have the opportunity. You could list things that you're waiting for before doing something. You could say oh, I'm waiting till a bit later in the semester to email my professor about a research position because he's probably very busy earlier in the semester. So just stuff that you're waiting before you can start on another step. You could list reasons that you're putting up with certain situations or people. I'm just putting up with this horrible class as a prerequisite for this cool class. Or I'm just putting up with this person because they're friends with my other friends and I don't want them to be mad at me. But stuff like that. You could list lessons that you keep forgetting. For me, an example is that I always think oh, I should drink alcohol more. Why shouldn't I do this? This is a great thing. And then the next morning I have a horrible hangover and could not feel worse, period. And then I remember, oh yeah, this is why I don't do this. So that could be a lesson that's useful for me to remind myself. You could have information on repetitive actions you take with certain people that you don't remember the outcome to, or at least you don't internalize it. This one is probably because it's an uncomfortable thought, but you could say oh, this person has made it very clear they don't want to date me, and any signal otherwise is a misinterpretation. Your subconscious probably doesn't want you to remember that because it's not a nice thing to think about, especially if you really like the person. But you have to move on, so you have to force your subconscious to acknowledge it. Or you could remind yourself things this person gets really offended at this seemingly innocuous thing, so make sure not to do that. Just stuff like that. And then other than yourself, some things you could do is you could cut in with like other third-party videos, like videos that you think are really important or like, you know, profound, or short videos about how to do something that like you need to do all the time and you keep forgetting or something. Like how to do, I'm saying probably more like emotional sort of things, like it's involving your own self, because that's probably where most of the utility you'll get from this. You could clip in with like quotes from audiobooks that you think are really important. Like if you have like a really favorite character in a book that like you try to emulate, you could like cut in with a few examples of him doing something that you think is very admirable. And then like, of course, since you'll update this video every month or so, like you could cut in with a different thing the next month. And then like you get exposure to that person that you're admiring. Or you could do this with a real person, even, if you can get videos of them or something. If you have friends, you could have them like record a video that says like, hey, I really care about you. Like, I hope you're doing well or something, if you have friends. But like, an idea is you could use like Miku Miku Dance, or if you can get like a VRM of like your waifu or something, you could like use VTubing software to make them say something to motivate you. And if you have the spare GPU power, you could use like deepfaking tools to like deepfake a person's like body and face, and also like use a real-time voice cloner to like clone their voice and make them say something. So like you could make your crush remind you that they don't like you, even with you never having confronted them or even told them that like you're making a video of any kind. That I think is a very cool idea. Yeah, like make use of tons of deepfakes, I would say. Like deepfakes are the thing of our generation right now, I would say. So definitely make as much use of them as you can to please the machine gods. And when you're watching this video, like I think I'm envisioning that you'd watch it like in the morning, like as you wake up, like so you can add motivational stuff, you know, to get you out of bed and ready to operate. Like you could even watch it in bed before you've started moving as a good way to wake you up. That could be a nice idea. I think definitely you would want to watch it at 2x speed, especially because like if you watch it every day, you're gonna vaguely remember most of it, which is the idea. You're making sure you never forget these things. If you have a commute, you could listen to just the audio, and that could be a good way to make use of the commute time. Definitely, I would say make this such that it can be understood with just the audio, because that just seems like it's really the way that this information is going to be processed by your brain. So, yeah. Yeah, that's the end of my bullet point list of notes. So, yeah, this recording went pretty well for like the first real recording that I'm doing. I'll have to do a bit of editing, and there might be some jagged jump cuts, so I hope you don't mind. But yeah, I think this went surprisingly okay. Like, hopefully this reaches your eyes and ears. And make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, because the YouTube algorithm likes that. And make sure to add my channel to your RSS feed reader. And share this video with your real life friends if you like it. Or if you have criticisms, make sure to tell me about them in the comments. I would like your criticisms, as much of them as you can. Thank you. Goodbye, everybody.